So today, we are diving deep into the story of the Bonanno family. But look, this is not just another gangster movie story. No, this is about a Sicilian dynasty in America whose greatest strength, this strict, ancient code of tradition, well, that would become its fatal flaw. We're going to see how the very thing that made them so powerful was also the seed of their own destruction. And it all really starts with the man who built the myth, Joseph Bonanno. This guy wasn't just a boss. He really saw himself as a patriarch. I mean, he quoted Machiavelli, he wore these beautiful silk suits, and he genuinely believed he was the head of this sprawling family, a keeper of tradition. And you have to understand that self-perception because it's the key to everything that comes next. And this, right here, gets to the heart of the Bonanno paradox. On one hand, you've got the myth, this really carefully constructed image of honor and family. And on the other, you have the brutal, ugly reality of their business. We're talking international drug trafficking, murder, and this web of betrayal that would just completely consume them in the end. It's that conflict that we're digging into. Now, to really get the Bonannos, you can't start in Brooklyn. You have to go all the way back to their psychological source code, a town in Sicily called Castellammare del Golfo. This was a place where you only trusted blood relatives and your closest friends. You never, ever trusted the state. And they basically imported that entire mindset, that whole operating system, directly to New York. And this is what made them so different from the other four families. They were the Castellammares first and mobsters second. And that created this incredibly intense, almost cult-like loyalty. They really saw themselves as purer, the true keepers of the old ways. But that same insulari, which was a survival tool back in Sicily, also bred this deep, corrosive paranoia that would prove to be their undoing in America. So how did this very insular mindset actually translate to the streets of New York? Well, when Joe Bonanno takes over, at just 26 years old by the way, he weaponized this unique family structure. While all the other families were fighting these bloody wars over street corners, Bonanno had a much, much bigger and quieter vision. Bonanno's real genius was making his empire invisible by making it, everywhere. He expanded west to Arizona, setting up smuggling routes from Mexico. He went north into Montreal, creating this powerful gateway for heroin. He was laundering money through dairies and funeral homes. He even controlled cheese distribution. I mean, think about that. Countless pizzerias were paying a tax to his family without even knowing it. He was everywhere and nowhere all at the same time. And his absolute masterstroke was something called the Pizza Connection. This was basically a massive transnational drug corporation disguised as a chain of your friendly neighborhood pizza joints. See, their deep Sicilian roots gave them exclusive access to refining labs back in Palermo. From there, the heroin was smuggled into the US inside cans of tomatoes and olive oil, and then distributed through this vast, totally unassuming network of pizzerias. Absolutely brilliant. And the economics of this were just breathtaking. Okay, so the initial investment to buy 1 kilo of pure heroin in Sicily was about $5,000. Right, but once that kilo was smuggled into the US, cut up, and distributed on the streets of New York and other cities, its value exploded to $250,000. That's not just a good return on investment, that's like having your own printing press for money. The sheer scale of this is just staggering. By the late 1970s, it's estimated that the family was pulling in $2 billion from heroin alone. This wasn't just a crime family anymore. It was, for all intents and purposes, one of the wealthiest and most powerful drug cartels on the entire planet. But you know how it goes. With that kind of money, that kind of power, comes incredible arrogance. And that fortress of tradition, it started to show some serious cracks. And this whole new era was personified by one man, the terrifying and incredibly greedy Carmine Galante. Galante was, to put it mildly, a psychopath who took over the family while the official boss was away. He monopolized the heroin trade and refused to share any of the profits with the other families. He got so brutal and so greedy that the commission, which is basically the mafia's board of directors, they sanctioned his murder. And it was carried out with help from his own men. That's a huge sign of just how much chaos was bubbling under the surface. This instability, this paranoia, this internal rot, It created the perfect opening for what would become the single most devastating undercover operation in the history of law enforcement. For 6 long years, FBI agent Joseph Pistone lived as Donnie Brasco, a supposed jewel thief. He got in so deep, he was so trusted by these top-level mobsters like Lefty Ruggiero and Sonny Black Napolitano that he was actually about to be officially inducted. He was going to become a made man. The FBI had to pull him out before he was ordered to kill someone. So when the truth finally came out, the legal fallout was obviously immense. We're talking over 100 convictions. But the emotional shockwave, that feeling of just pure personal violation, that was even more profound. And that's what's so devastating about it, right? Pistone's infiltration didn't just break a criminal enterprise, it completely shattered the personal bonds of trust their entire world was built on. You see, Lefty wasn't just worried about prison, he was heartbroken over the man he thought of as a son. The family that prided itself on trusting no one had let the ultimate outsider into its very heart. The aftermath of Donnie Brasco was just pure chaos. Sonny Black was executed for letting Brasco in. The family was literally kicked off the commission. And out of all those ashes, a new boss rises up, Joseph Massino. And he was determined to rebuild by taking the family deep, deep into the shadows, learning from everyone else's mistakes. For more than a century, one rule stood as the absolute bedrock of the mafia: omerta, the code of silence. A soldier might break, a capo might crack under pressure, but a boss never ever talks. He goes to his grave with the secrets, period. But then, in 2004, Joseph Massino, the last great Don, the man who would rebuild the Bonanno family into the most powerful in New York, did the unthinkable. Facing the death penalty for murder, he decided to save his own skin. He became the first sitting boss of a New York crime family to ever become a government witness. But he went even further. While he was in prison, he agreed to wear a wire to secretly record his own successor, Vinnie Gorgeous Bossiano, and he caught him plotting to murder a federal prosecutor. A boss didn't just break omerta, he became an active agent of the state. It was the ultimate betrayal. And this is really how the story ends. The family that saw itself as Sicilian royalty, as the keepers of this ancient, honorable tradition, it all ended with its leader, its father, secretly recording conversations for the FBI. The myth was just finally and completely obliterated by reality. So the story of the Bonannos really leaves us with this fascinating question. I mean, sure, their code of tradition made them powerful, but it also made them paranoid and arrogant, and it left them vulnerable to the exact kinds of betrayals they were terrified of. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, about any rigid system, and whether the foundations we build our lives on can ever truly survive the pressures of power and greed.